Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Turn Right Machine Works. My name is Keith. We're in here at the hydraulic press. I've kind of prepped this out. I have a towel down here. I have a piece of cardboard underneath here so that I don't accidentally put a dent in this. A couple days ago, a customer called us up and said he had a lathe spindle, and he had the bearings. That'll be for that end there, and this one here will be for this end here. And he asked me if I would like to change them out for him. So I said, bring it on by and let's take a look at it. And I grabbed it, looked at it, and I said, yep, I can do that. He was kind enough to give us a breakdown. And this is just going to be a mechanical video. We're going to take this thing apart, replace the bearings, and put it back together. And I'm bringing you along for the ride. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this breakdown and I'm going to put it over here. But here's a picture of it, just so I'm not hiding anything from you. I'm just putting it over there so that it's up off of the table and I can get a good glimpse of it. All right, this looks like a double working in. A nice threaded spindle on both ends. Everything does come off of this end here, with the exception of this cap, and that's held on with these Allens right here. That bearing's held on with that lock nut there, and I believe there's probably a taper lock underneath the pulleys. There's a double set of bearings here, and I believe there's a shim that goes in between there, and the shim is zip tied inside there, and there's some kind of numbers on there, but that's all set. I think when we pull this off, we'll kind of look at it. I believe we'll just keep them together just like they are when we go to put them on there. All right, with this being a wood spindle, there is sawdust and everything down in here. So my first action is to go ahead and take the compressor, my air nozzle, and I'm going to blow every bit of sawdust out around here. It also looks like his belt is starting to go to crap on him. There's some rubber embedded in on that serpentine there. We'll see if that blows out. If it doesn't blow out, it should be picked out with the scribe. And then we can start breaking down. And we'll start off with this collar on the end here. Okay, that looks pretty clean. A lot better. No fuzzies in there. All right. Now I will have to get a spanner wrench here. We'll have a couple other tools. I've already got Allen's, metric Allens for there. And I also have them in the socket style. Got my driver here, and we're going to find an Allen. All right. I like that. And we have a little extension in here. And I believe there's 3 of them here, or 2 of them, 3 of them. All right, those are sets there. They go into that little groove right there. All right, and we took that off that way there, and that little register there. Flat side in. Okay, now these bearings here are a press fit on there. All right, now we need to get behind here to pull those off of there. So I'm going to get my small clamshell, and we're going to just put that around this. Picked up our small clamshell, and we reached down in search of this ring here because we want to be able to set this thing up to put the clamshell on. But I noticed that we stacked that up there, we stacked this up here, and I'm not going to have too much room under here. So I'm going to crank the table down, and it looks like we'll use probably a couple of our 1-inch spacers to go underneath this as well. And we'll just lay another rag like that so we don't destroy this nice white paint that's on the front of the lathe here. All right, or the spindle. I got to crank the table down. So basically I have rack and pinion both sides here. All right, as I'm taking tension off of this, you could see that the 2 pinions turn in the same direction there. because I run those two idlers on past the sprocket on the one side. That keeps both pinions rolling either up or rolling down with one handle. Alright, now I'm going to bring her on down now. I'm just lowering her down. Okay, I think I'm just going to use this donut under that donut, because I just needed to have a little bit for the spindle threads to go down past. And we'll still put this in there like this. That looks good. Okay, nice and stable. Alright, I'm going to go hunt down a large ball bearing, because I'm going to need one in here, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to put that to play with the clamshell puller. And clamshell puller will give me plenty of length right there, and I have enough height over the top to run the wrench here. Alright, we spanned our clamshell, and that the clamshell, nobody's ever, the reason why is so they're razor thin and clearance in here, taper wedged, and you can actually get them under almost minute amount of clearance and get behind that bearing, but the two halves together, and that's why they call that a clamshell. Alright, we just bring these in. They don't have to be really torqued, but sometimes you might be reaching in behind something, and I'm not saying that I didn't tighten these up and use that to pop the bearing loose in that case, but I'm gonna just try to just get behind the bearing so that I have at least pressure that I know that it's not going to expand, because it's behind the bearing only about the depth of that little chamfer that's on there, which is only about the depth or the width of the race on the outside there. Alright, we had two choices of balls to go in here, the small one or the big one. Either one of them is going to do the job. I think we'll leave the big one in there. Alright, and we're going to have a foot here, and your bar, this pushes up against the parallel that's going to go on here, okay, and the parallel sits on top of that right there, and that shoulder's got to come below that surface right there. So we're going to screw this down. A lot easier to do it now than it is to hold everything all up there and do it while you're holding all that weight. This is flat on the end, and that flat is going to just be pushing straight against that ball, which will pivot really nice too as well. You see me do some toe clamping and holding manifold parts in the mill with using bearing balls, and it comes in handy sometimes when you don't have a straight push. What I'm doing here is I don't want to destroy those centers or any part of that bore, because it's just this is a mounting part of the lathe as well. Alright, put that on there like that. We got two bridges that go on there and two nuts. Those are threaded all the way in as well. I just check to make sure that they're all full engagements. Okay, and that's tight. Alright, and I'm just using good quality Poto crescent wrench just to hold the rod from rotating. I'm just going to be turning this nut right here, and that alone should pull. We got to pick the right wrench here. And you can hear the bearing already starting to walk off. That little pink, yeah, the bearing's lifting up already. It's already an 1/8 of an inch up. I got a puller clamshell that's bigger than this one. This is my small one, and sometimes I just got to show the part my clamshell and the bearing flies off of there. When you got the right tool and you're using it stress-free, it's unbelievable the ease that you can remove something with. And I'm holding the top and keeping everything stable right there, because this is going to be like a balancing act here as well. This is almost, I can probably still got enough grip. All right, now you grab this whole thing all at once. Move the ball so you just don't lose it under the back of the press. All right, now there's a shim. I know there's a shim behind these bearings right here, right between the two bearings. I just wanted to see how that sits in there. And you can see a little bit of fold over. So when that bearing goes into the housing or whatever, it sets in, has slightly rolled that over. I'll have to get a good close picture of that. All right, so those went like that. This is a Korean set of bearings, and the ones that we're actually putting in here are NTNs, which are a Japanese bearing. And I've used a lot of NTNs, a lot. Actually, you can see a little fold on that. That's a brass. It's just a piece of brass in there, so it is soft material. But if it's not right in the middle of that, it will fold over. Okay, I just went and get the screwdriver, because in the drawing it shows a ring or a collar, and I go, okay, well, it has a little gap underneath here. You can see that there, and of course you can see I can touch it and I can move it. Okay, but I actually go, I'm gonna have to get a screwdriver and pry that off of there, and boop, there we go. Little tiny bit of rust and moisture and everything else underneath here. All right. Keeping our order on the table here. Okay. This pulley now is held on with a taper lock. So we got four screws that we pull out of this and put two of them into these two screws. That'll jack that apart, and then this will lift off. Okay, I think we got an extension here, 10 millimeter. Okay, we'll have to find out what those threads are for the jacking bolts there. Alright, I went out in my catch-all box there and dug through, and because they weren't 5/16, they were 8 millimeters. So I got two nice clean 8 millimeter bolts that screw all the way down to where they're bottoming out against where they need to push. And they do have two different size heads on them, so I'll have to use two different wrenches to break those loose, but I've got good threads there. Alright. Okay, I got a 10 and a 13 socket there, and alright, I'm going to get a 10 and a 13 box wrench so I can hand feel those. I went and got two wrenches so that I can feel this by hand, and I need to hold this thing steady. Should be just a little bit on each one. Just to be on the safe side. I don't know why we might need to take this ring off. It doesn't really show that there is a difference in diameter, but I want to make sure that we're not trying to push it with these, and these are holding the lip or something on there. There we go. I got one battery life left here. Let's change it out with a fresh one. Makes a little difference. Okay, that was not holding anything on this ring right here. So here again, we're going to put never sees on these. Lubricant on threads makes them move easier, less friction, less pressure to get the same push. And we're not going to have an Allen wrench to put that in there, but I'm going to grab a spanner so that I can grab two of these holes here and hold it with my spanner. All right, this is this is all. I've had this since the shipyards, and I've done a little bit of trick grinding and a couple other things in on them, and I've had to straighten them and clean them and all kinds of different things. But they're still trucking. But they'll give me that leverage that I need. Feels like it's easing up on the bolt pressure, so I think I'm getting there. That one was actually loose. This one here is loose, so they are pushing. Yep, there. I really got it feeling good now. Do I need that? Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right, and I'm going to pull these bolts out here. Now, whenever you use bolts and you push against the surface there, you got your raised materials up there. Now, those two surfaces really don't touch each other, but you want to massage those a little bit so that you don't have, the raised burr area. You just want to remove it. Okay, we're putting everything down in order. This should just come off. This will go upside down. We're going to start a new row here. Okay, I'm just going to clear a few tools off of the top here and set them in their home spot here. And a couple wrenches we'll set on over here. All right. Now, there's two things. I think pulling this collar off of here first before we go for the lock nut, which we'll need to tap that keeper down, and I'll need my outside spanner. Next, we're gonna pull this off of here, and we can set those over here. There we go. Now you can tell which way this goes on here because you have nuts and washer countersinks in on that side there. They're slightly spot faced. All right, little punch, take down that. All right, we take a punch and we're just going to punch that down to where it has clearance and it's almost out as far as the rest of them. You want to try not to just keep bending those things back and forth or over bending those. All right, and we glance at this to make sure this is right and left hand threads, and it is right hand thread. That was easy, huh? All right, and that's a spacer ring. And that comes off that way. Start another order in here. Okay. Now we can put this in the vise, good vise over at the mill, and we can break loose this nut that way. I think that's probably our best bet right there. Okay, I'm gonna set this down in here. All right, I broke the nut loose, and I just used that, holding it in the vise. All right, and that comes off. That comes off. Spacer. That comes off. I think that's it. That's it. Okay, and then it's just the bearing. And that bearing's gonna have to be pressed off. And that's no problem. That's no big deal. All right. Now we'll take our cover off of here. It's nothing more than like a Lambert's seal up here in the front, and you can see a little tiny bit of rust around here. I may polish that just a little bit in the lathe there, and we'll finish white. We'll wipe everything 100% clean on this part here before assembling it. Okay, so we know that that'll go over there. This will be the new bearing that's going in. And pair of clean parallels, and this pushes off this direction here. I can feel just a little tiny bit of a little click click, not too bad. I don't know if I was making noise or if it was feeling something, and that's why you wanted to change it or whatever. But I can, in the main spindle here, I can feel just a little catch in there. All right, we're going to clean all of this up, wipe it down, prep it, and in the morning we'll go ahead and reassemble it. Coffee tastes good. Hey, good morning, everybody. All right, I've tended my chickens, got the shop open here. Fire's starting to go. It did go out last night, but we're still about 65 degrees in here, which is nice and comfortable. And we have the sunshine coming in here. I cleared out most of the tools that I didn't think I was going to need and put a couple others over here that I might need. Now we're going to start reassembling this. And of course, here's the bearing here, and there's the cap. And hey, look at that. I just picked this up, and there is hole pattern design right there that crap dropped out of those threaded holes in there. This is every nook and cranny you've got to clean and putting back. None of that stuff should be getting into bearings or anything else like that. So, and that just fell out of there being upside down at night. All right, this is going to be, this and the spindle are our first two pieces we're going to clean up. All right, I'm going to go grab a couple clean rags and my little green Scotch-Brite pad. This little Lambert area right in here, it's got just a little tiny bit of rust on it, and you can see right around this edge where it sits right there. There's a little bit there. And that green Scotch-Brite doesn't harm any of the surfaces. It'll just rough up some of this scarring by staining, rust staining on here. Looks 100% better in there. I think I'm going to hunt down a small wire brush too. I remember I had one over there. All right, and that's just to get down in those grooves a little bit. Nice and clean. Okay, our first part is ready to reassemble. Now, I can't take care of any staining or the paint job or anything else on this project, and that's not up to me to repair that. All we're doing is changing out the bearings themselves. So I wipe it down, just make sure I don't have any lint in there. I am using white rags, which are some of the best. I like them better than the red ones, especially if you're in on marine boats and stuff like that. If you have the red ones there, you're going to be staining people's seat cushions and all kinds of other things. The red rags do stain if you have white stuff around. All right, Scotch-Brite. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're just doing this all by hand. It's a hand job here. That's probably just oils from hands in that center section there, from handling it. Okay. Okay, that piece is ready to reassemble, and we know first thing, the bearing's got to be pressed on here. Okay. All right, I went and got a few things here. We blew the dust off of that area over there just so it wouldn't get onto any of our stuff. We're going to clear our platform. We got a nice flat plate here, and we got two parallels we're going to use on end, and that is going to be our pressing surface. Actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and deburr these. They got a little burr on the edge here. All right, I went ahead and knocked off the burrs there, and I thought these were actually perfectly the same length here. And I have two sets, and I use them a lot, but I usually have them spread out, and I really haven't noticed that they actually are about a 1/16 of an inch difference there. So I just take a broach backing strip and put it in there, and that's perfectly flush, and that's going to work well enough for me here. All right, now we're going to spread these apart about the distance of our rod here. Okay, a little bit more, and we're going to bring our ram down just so we'll pre-center this a little bit. I actually have two nice thick sets. One's a little bit wider. They're both about the same length. They are both 3" on the height here, but in the K&T, that's a good job to go ahead and plan on facing those off. I have a backup ring for the bearing, and that will be setting like this, and this will push on the inner race of the bearing. So we can go ahead and open up our bearing. Now, I noticed, I pull this out of the box, and this is a well-made bearing. It's made in Germany. And my only question is, this is a shielded bearing, and this is a rubber lip seal. Okay, if debris gets into this bearing, it's going to take a shit before that one does. As far as wear, my only thing that I would make sure when I get into spindle bearings and things like that to actually have a rubber lip seal. But this is what the customer gave us to put on here, and that's what we're gonna do. All right, we got that slipped on there. This is the backup ring here, and I chose this because I wanted to make sure that I was pushing against that surface right there, and I'll put this right in here like this, We're going to leave a little bit of clearance there because we don't want to touch those threads at all. And I think that's going to be it. And this is flat, and we have a nice flat head here on our press. We know it wasn't that hard. We actually could have taken it into the arbor press, and probably our hand arbor press, we probably could have pressed that in there. Just using this ring here and into the, there's many different ways to do different stuff, and I just have the camera set up in here, and I figured we'd just go ahead and run everything right here if we could. And okay, so bearings on there. Now we're ready to switch this back to our cap being here. Okay, let's bring our part back in here, and we're good to go. Once again, and this is all wiped nice and clean. And just check this fit in here. Okay, just like the other bearing. All right, we have a little collar. Nice and clean. Slides right on there. And now our washer that locks the nut. This one over everything, right? This goes over all of that, right? So that we can keep that out of the way for right now. A little piece of lint on there we don't need. And okay, I had this out by my Bridgeport outside in the shelter, and it was really cold. I set it on top of the wood stove and really warmed it up and made it nice and soft again. Very nice. All right. Now, pure nickel never seizes, one of the best, I think. And I'm not going to put a whole bunch on here, but I am going to make sure that everything that I put this back together has just a little bit in there. And if it comes back here and we have to take it apart again, we know that it's going to be nice and easy. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this out, go put it in the vise that I did, and take the spanner wrench and tighten this nut up a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll lock it, and then we can do everything else in here. All right, I just want to make sure we got a good cinch on that. And it doesn't have to be torqued or anything. We just need to make sure that it doesn't have any play, so that we know that that bearing will be secure in that one area. Okay, and one last time, just blowing it off before we put it down in here. And we did line up that one right there. So we take our little punch here, and we're just going to tap that into. You only need to tap one, you know. Once somebody knows that they can roll over and tap and lock those rings, that they bend every which one that they can up in there. All you need is one. It's just one safety lock. There's only one spot where it goes into the keyway on the shaft to hold it on the inside, so one on the outside is good enough. All right, now I don't know where I got the frog today. All right, we'll wipe that ring. I think we'll put a little Scotch-Brite to that too as well. just take some of that moisture staining off of there. Okay, there we go. That slides into there. Now we got this ring. It holds that down positive. That locks that thrust on there. And you can see this surface here had that ring surface on there. And that'll go down there like that. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to hold these in my hand. I'm just blowing. If there's anything on threads or in threads, it causes a bind, and we just don't want to go there. All right, and set them right there. And one at a time, we're just going to take a little tiny bit of Never Sees, just like we said we were going to do. Okay. One thing I don't want to, not bragging about the walls, I don't want to snap off any of these bolts, but I also want to hand feel the tension or the tightness that I actually have on this. And here again, I can use my spanner here. Okay, we know that they're not over tightened, but they are down really snug. All right, now the next thing that goes on here is our pulley. And we talked about the raised surface where our jack screws went in there. And we're going to go ahead and take a little Scotch-Brite on the pneumatic tool. And we're just going to flush those off a little bit right there. Because we just want to hit, we don't want to hit any of this surface out here. Because that's a precision face surface right there. Now we did say this had rubber in it. And we're pretty sure that some of it blows out there. We're going to take a scribe real quick and just pick out some of that. Okay, this is just a little 2-inch Scotch-Brite pad here. And we just massage those two areas down. That's all we needed to do. Alright, now we've got our scribe here. And they are in there, but the scribe does loosen these up, and not just because I know that they're in there and they really shouldn't be in there. We're going to go ahead and clean this part up here for them. We'll be able to loosen these up, blow them off, and more than likely he's probably should have a new belt, or we don't know if he replaced it, but if he's doing this, he's probably cleaning up the whole machine here. That would be my thoughts anyway. Okay, let's see if that takes care of them all. Okay, we're just going to wipe off a little excess Never Sees or whatever. Nothing worse than handing a part to somebody and having it goo all over them. Alright. That all looks good. All right, nothing goes in here. The next part is this. We've deburred that. We've taken all the black belt materials out. There's a couple little spots in there, but we're pretty clean. All right, I can see inside the bore, and the split line of the taper lock is right there. And we're just going to get our Sharpie here. I'm always trying to bring you the best in video quality, sound, and quality of film, and trying to capture my share as best as I can. Time to time things happen, like during this little next segment here, the batteries on my voice transmitter ran down to a point where the squelch just went overwhelming on the audio, and I had to just scrap that part out. But good thing I got the video. So I'm just going to take my first hand at narrating this next little segment. Okay, so I went to get my Sharpie. Came back with my Sharpie, and I marked that one split line stain that I knew was lining up with the taper lock. Now this slips down over that shoulder, nice and clean, and its rotation all has to do with this ring, and the numbers on the other side here correspond with its indexing or whatever that purpose is, but that's set with that individual piece itself, so it's not timed. It doesn't have to be timed to the shaft. I'm just final cleaning the taper lock here, making sure that there's nothing on there. Now the taper lock components are assembled completely dry. You don't put any lubrication or anything else on those. A little bit of debris I just want to break loose and make sure that the green Scotch-Brite takes off anything that might be stuck to the outside. I'm lining up that. Of course, there's only 4 bolts that hold that on, so the bolts themselves will do the final timing of that, but I've got it lined up generally in the right area. And blow all the bolts off, just so if you got anything stuck between the threads, they can go in there and gall, and no need to waste that. I add a little dab of the Never Sees on these fasteners as well. This really is kind of a clean assembly. It's not like you're working on something that's going to go outside and go down the road or go on a piece of equipment in the dirt or whatever. So the Never See is just basically to make sure that the ease of changing out these bearings the next time is just that much better for the next person, or myself if I do it again. What I'm explaining here is actually that the taper lock usually draws the component that you're locking on onto the taper. The taper locks to the shaft. Well, that assembly sits down against that shoulder, so you know there is a question of how much it actually brings it up, and then that collar there and the bearings. You know, I'm kind of gauging that height there from that little ring. I remember when we were pulling that little ring off, I had a little gap under it, like I was going to pull it off with a screwdriver, and then it just pulled off by hand. Alright, so basically just taking a wrench and going around and making sure that I have an even torque down. And of course, when you tighten one, you can feel the rest of them, and they all loosen up. It's kind of knowing how it's traveling down, you know, while you're tightening it. we're looking at that shoulder itself, and then we're looking underneath to see it's still sitting against that shoulder. Most of the time when you're trying to time V-belts and stuff like that with the taper locks on there, you're watching how far it's going side to side, especially if it's a critical belt alignment. Alright, now it's getting firm enough to where I can't really hold it, so I put the spanner in the 2 jack bolt holes to hold a little tension so that I can make sure I get an equal. And I stay in the same direction. I don't try to switch hands or whatever. I want to keep that torque equal by hand. It's not that I have a torque wrench on there. I mean, you could go get a torque wrench if you want to, but after you've been wrenching for quite a few years, you're pretty close, as long as you always hold that wrench exactly in the same position and give it the same pull and feel. And I'm happy with that torque, so I'm going to let it fly like that. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and each part we're dressing up with the Scotch-Brite. Just to remove more or less the stain of looking, makes everything look nice and new, or as new as it possibly can be. That wasn't a glossy part to start with. It was just a bare metal ring. It wasn't even blued or coated with zinc or anything like that. Alright, now we got the next 2 bearings, and we got the shim in between the 2 bearings is actually sealing against the outside of the race, so that when it's installed into the housing, the outer race are held snug to each other, and the inner race is allowed to have the freedom of movement on the shaft itself. The forward spindle bearing does the thrust. And we moved on to put the ring on before we do the bearings. Making sure there's no debris anywhere between them. They're all machine surfaces. You want them to go together. Machine surface against machine surface. The timing of that is indexed by the bolts that hold it. And it's a uniform hole pattern, so it could very well be in one of 6 positions around there and still be lined up with the numbers on the other side for the indexing, whatever that may be set up for on this particular lathe. Now these bolts I'm not afraid of snapping off with my DeWalt impact as soon as I find the right Allen to stick in there. It is a pretty torquey little tool. Now I'm happy, and I'm using that myself. I'm not using it in this video because I'm not paid for this. It's my tool. It's my choice of tool, and I'm enjoying it. That's why you're seeing it here. If I wasn't enjoying this tool, it wouldn't be in the video. Now I'm just checking how much torque that is. Can I get any more on there? No, I can't. I'm satisfied with it. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and snap the bearing on there. And I've got to cut the ties on. We're going to keep them in that same exact order. That's the way they got them together. We're just taking a close look at it. Making sure that that shim is even in there, so that by pushing them together, I'm talking once again about the fixed hold on those bearings is on the outside housing when it gets assembled in there. Okay, I'm getting set to press those on there. Now I decided to take one off, and I'm going to press one on at a time till I get it down onto that shoulder. I picked a piece of tubing, thick walled tubing, that actually rides that race pretty close, and that piece there that goes on the end slips over that diameter freely as well. Boy, that press is quiet. I get a lot of comments that actually, you know, think that my press is too noisy, but the microphone actually picks up more noise than there actually is in person. I have people stop by sometimes and I'm running it, and they go, wow, it really doesn't sound that quiet on your videos. And I think it's just a microphone. All right. I'm going to blow this off a little bit. But see, I've got it down on that shoulder about, a quarter inch sticking out. So, very carefully. You can see how that little brass is a little bit folded over from just boxing it up by the manufacturer. And even if it looks like lint, you don't want nothing between your bearings, and you want everything to be clean. Make sure that shim is not sticking out all the way around. And now I put the collar back on here one more time, but I see a little bit of junk on the surface there. Alright. Now we should be able to push this all the way home. Alright, we're all done with the pressing now. Now we're just going to give it one more clean look at it before we assemble it for the last time. Bearings feel good. It's not sticking out. Everything's kosher. I'm real happy with that. This doesn't have to be timed anywhere. It can go on at any one point, and just the 3 set screws as soon as I find them. There they are. Alright. I'm just finding the Allen wrench. There we go. And the last 3 items I'm going to never seize. Never seize actually goes quite a long ways. And the last one. And there we go. Wipe off the excess never sees all the way around. Alright, I'm just going to box up the bearings for the customer and pick up my area here. Well, that wasn't too bad, huh? Made it to the end of that little glitch. Alright, we did have a little glitch in our microphone there for a couple of reasons. I don't know if my transmitter got bumped or whatever, but it went into a weird setting there. Anyhow, we're about ready to call our customer and tell him his spindle is done. I know he's going to be excited to get it back. And I hope you enjoyed the follow through on this project. Just some of the ways that I go about taking something apart and putting it back together. And until next time, get her done.